come to 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 31 in our study today. And I appreciate you joining me again, and I hope these studies are being beneficial for you as we walk through this book together. So in chapter 12, Paul is discussing spiritual gifts. In the first part of the chapter, he's named some of the spiritual gifts. He's talked about they have many gifts, but they all come from one source. Now, in the latter part of chapter 12, here beginning in verse 12, he's going to begin to use an illustration to show the importance of each gift, how that one is not more important than the other. And of course, in Corinth, and we'll see as we see in chapters 12 through 14, they were placing greater value and emphasis on the ability to speak in tongues. Actually, Paul said in chapter 14, prophecy is for the benefit of all, but tongues only benefit the believers. And if there were no interpreter, then the tongue was not even a benefit to the believer. But yet they were elevating tongues above others. And Paul is trying to get them to see that each gift has a place. Just as with the body, God created the body. There's one creator, it comes from one source. Yet there are many members. Just as there are many gifts, they come from one Spirit, one Lord, one God. And so he's trying to get them to see that there's no gift more important than the other, even as there's no part of the body that's more important than another. And so in verse 12 and verse 13, he will say, "For as the body is one, it has many members, but all the members of that one body being many are one body." So you have many parts of the body, but they all make up the body. The body is not just an eye. The body is not just an ear. The body is not just a nose. The body is not just a head. The body is not just feet. The body is not just hands. He said there's one body, but there are many members. And so we are in Christ. And he said we're all baptized by one Spirit into one body. And we've all been made to drink of that one Spirit, verse 13. The idea of drinking that one Spirit is we've all been baptized into one body, being united in that one Spirit. The idea of drink is to be saturated. That's the idea that he's talking about here. And so when he talks about being saturated, he said, united in one body, we are saturated in one Spirit. So we're all baptized in union with one Spirit and made to drink with one Spirit. All who are baptized and thus made to drink have spiritual life together. And so he says, you're baptized into one body by one Spirit. Well, you weren't put in that body to be divisive. You weren't put in that body to have one more important than the other. You can't say, well, I have the gift of this, and you have the gift of that. I have the gift of tongues, you have the gift of healings. And therefore my gift of tongues is more important than your gift of healings. No, he said, we've all been baptized by one Spirit into one body. We've come to drink in that one Spirit. And so you wouldn't have the Spirit putting us into one body and drinking in that one Spirit for the purpose of dividing and being filled with strife and envy over the gifts that we have. And so in verse 15 and going forward, he's going to begin to describe the use of the body and its parts. And so in verse 15, he will say, if the foot should say, because I'm not the hand, I'm not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? Would you say because you have tongues, another had gifts of healing, that therefore the gifts of tongue are more important than the other? That therefore the gift of healing is not of the body? The gift of healing is not a spiritual gift, not important? No, they're blowing out of proportion. The spiritual gifts may be over discerning of spirits. But here, Paul is saying each one has its value. None is to be more important than the other, and none are to feel left out. So he says again, verse 15, if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I'm not of the body. Is it not of the body? Because the foot gets less attention than the hand? Because spiritual discerning gets less attention than the gifts of tongues? Is it therefore not a spiritual gift, not from the same Spirit? And so what he's dealing with here is their pride. They're being puffed up over their spiritual gifts and placing more importance of one over the other. You can't place more importance over the foot than over the hand, or the foot than the head. And so verse 16 and verse 17, if the ear should say, because I'm not the eye, I'm not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, Where would the smelling be? And so if the whole body were to speak in tongues, where would the prophet be? P-R-O-F-I-T. If all were to speak in prophecy, where would the gift of discerning spirits, the gift of wisdom, the gift of knowledge be? And so in verse 17, he simply shows us an absurdity. Again, he says, if the whole body were an eye, what if the whole body were an eye? Well, the whole body's not an eye. And and spiritual gifts are not all summed up in the gift of tongues or the gift of prophecy. And so you see the absurdity of what he's talking about. And so then verse 18 through 22. But now God has set members, each one of them, in the body, just as he pleased. Pause. God gave each one gifts, just as he pleased. He didn't give gifts of tongue to everybody. He didn't give gift of prophecy to everybody. He gave to some gifts of tongue, some gift of prophecy, some gift of healing, and so on. Well, God gave many members and set each member in its part. Each part has its role or its function. There are many members. They're diverse. They have different functions, and they manifest themselves in different ways. So it is with the parts of the body. We have different parts of the body. They have different functions, and they manifest themselves in different ways. And so again, verse 18. Remember, God set them there. Verse 9. And if they were, verse 19. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now indeed there are many members, yet one body. The point is simply making here, all are needful. If one member would become another, and if this privilege were granted to all, and if all should select what they deemed the most illustrious member, and if all became that, where would the body be? If I could choose just to be a head, if I could choose just to be an eye, where would the body be? But the fact is, the body has many members. If I could choose just one spiritual gift, where would the others be? There are many spiritual gifts. And so each member has its gifts, each member has its functions, and we're not to be jealous one of the other. Then he will continue in verse 23. And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, on these we bestow greater honor, and our unpresentable parts have greater modesty. So verse 24, but our presentable parts have no need. But God composed the body, having given greater honor to that part which lacks it. And so here Paul is helping us see that the body has many parts, and they are to be each honored in their own part. What the eye, because it can reach out further, said it's more important than the hand because the hand can't reach out as far. What if the head is placed high above the foot because the foot simply plods out in the grass? No, each one is interdependent. Each one intermingles. They have a complete interdependence one on another. Each is to regard the other with the same kind of regard. An eye may see hurt. A hand may comfort. A head would not have much information to process if the feet did not carry it around to experience all there is to experience. But as we see in verses 23 through 25, these people were divided because of their spiritual gifts. And Paul says the gifts weren't given to be divided, but they were given to unite you. And you should have the same care. You should have the same anxious empathy, one for another. Because why? Verses 25 and 26, there is an interdependence that is here. He says in verse 25 that there should be no division in the body, but the members should have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all members rejoice with it. We see that in our body. You ever mashed your finger with a hammer? Does it just hurt the fingernail on that particular finger? Does that single finger, is that the only part of your body that hurts? No, it sends a chill down through your whole body. If you get a sore throat, does it just affect the throat? If you have a tonsil infection, does it just affect the tonsils? If you have a problem with your appendix, does it just affect the appendix? No, we see every part has its interdependence. Every part is intermingled. And there should be the same care and the same empathy, the same concern for every part. And then he'll say in verse 27, now you're the body of Christ and members individually. And God has appointed these in the church, first apostles, Second, those who have gifts of prophecy, those who have gifts of teaching, those who have gifts of miracles, then gifts of healing, then gifts of help, gifts of administration, and varieties of tongues. So he's simply laying out an order here. Here you simply see this is axiomatic. There's no single gift that is all important. God is talking about the order of things, and each gift has its place. An apostle had his place. The gift of prophecy had its place, and the gift of tongues had its place. So then it will say, and these are just rhetorical questions in verse 29, are all prophets? Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Are all workers of miracles? Do all have gifts of healing? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret? And the answer obviously is no to all these. Here you have all these spiritual gifts. Not everyone has the same gift, but everyone has its place. Everyone has its value. But then verse 31 it says, but earnestly desire the best gifts. Prophecy was good for teaching, and it was beneficial to all. Tongues had their benefit, no only to believers, but as I said a while ago, only if there were an interpreter. So a takeaway or two here. We're not to say there's a member of the church, a member of the body, one more important than the other. The elders aren't more important than the deacons. The preacher's not more important than the elders. All are Christians, but they serve in different roles. A preacher is a Christian but serves in ministering the word. Elders are Christians but they serve in shepherding and watching for souls. Deacons are Christians but they serve the church. Being a Christian is the most important thing. And as Christians, we all have different gifts. We all serve in different ways. And those services are manifested in a number of ways. But we can't say one's more important than the other. There's no member that is a vestigial organ, nice to have but not necessary. Each member of the body itself is important. Yes, you can live without a gallbladder, and you can live without an appendix. But that's not how the body was intended to function. The body functions best when it has all of its original parts. You can have a knee replacement, and the knee still functions, but the body functions best when it has all its original parts, each in its place, doing its work. There's not one more important than the other. So it is with members of the body. We've all been baptized into one body, and we drink of one Spirit, and that one Spirit does not produce division. There's not one more important than the other. There's not one that has greater value than the other. Each of us has our place. And as we each perform what is our gift that comes from one God, one Lord, one Spirit, then we each contribute to the benefit and the profit of all. Thanks for listening with me, and thanks for joining me in this study. Think about that. Think about your place. Think about the value you have. Think about the service you give and how you manifest that service. Thanks for being with me. Love you all and miss you.